regulation between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is a huge part of poor health.
Huge. When I think about root causes of why people get sick, I would say hormonally, the two hormones that are the driving factor is cortisol and insulin. And cortisol is that hormone that's being released typically when you're getting in that too sympathetic of a state, right? That really aligns with what, Chinese medicine teaches and Japanese medicine. And when we're looking at how do we shift and change things in the body, the biggest recommendations in Chinese medicine are first, let's focus on your lifestyle. Let's shift your lifestyle and your daily habits, the way you're living. And then another big one they have for this emotional regulation is Qigong. It's really training your body on how to breathe properly while doing certain movements. That's incredibly powerful.
Dr. Axe, it's such an honor to have you on the podcast. And for people that are watching this on video, I'm in your studios in Nashville. Thank you for having me.
That's right. Welcome. Well, hey, thanks so much for having me on the show, Dr. Darshan. I appreciate it and excited to dive in today.
Yeah. So this is a big honor for me, actually, because 12 years ago now, when I was going through my own massive health struggles and learning how to get healthy, your videos really helped, and I'm a doctor trained in Western medicine, and I had no education on the science of things like nutrition and gut health and detoxification. I learned so much from you. And I still do. So it's just incredible to be here with you and to talk about all of this.
Well, I'm so honored. Well, vice versa. I know I had you on my podcast and your background is just amazing. And so I appreciate all your wisdom as well. So I love to be iron sharpens iron for each other. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. You know what? One of the things I really love about your message is that you don't ignore all of the history that we have in medicine. You kind of bring it into your thought process. You talk about it a lot. And where does that come from in your life?
Well, I think one of the things I'm always incredibly conscious of, and this is true with health, but it's true with, I think, everything in life is, I want to know what the truth is. And so for me, I found that I'm going to find the greatest truth via looking both at today, the past, and the future. And so I really try and think about one, and there's actually a Bible verse that reminds me of this, and Jesus said this, by their fruit, you'll recognize them. And so I like to look at different people. I like to look at different systems and say, which one bears the greatest fruit? And that's how I'm going to decide what truth is. And so when I went and looked back at how long people were living in the Bible, when I went and looked back at Chinese medicine in Asia, and even Japanese medicine, I thought, well, Japan has the longest lifespan today. They're the healthiest country generally, Okinawa. What sort of medicine do they practice? When I started going back, you know what I learned? They practice a type of Chinese medicine called Kempo. That's a still big part of their medical system today. And Ayurveda, that's another one there. So when I go and look at what are some people in groups that lived a really long time, why do they live a long time? And I found, again, the people of the Bible. I found Ayurveda. I found Chinese medicine. There's a lot of truth there. Here's the other amazing thing is I went and tried them myself. And I also realized that Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, for example, they're based off of millions of individual case studies.
Right. Millions and millions.
Yep. Yeah. And now listen, somebody could argue with me that they're, it's not a double-blind placebo and it's not to the standards of Western medicine today. But I would also argue one of the unique things about those medical modalities is there was not a bias there and they weren't being influenced by a pharmaceutical industry. And so for me, when I am deciding on what sort of protocol to create for a patient, I'm simultaneously or together, I'm trying to say, what does Chinese medicine and Ayurveda teach us? What does the Bible teach us? But also, what is the latest scientific literature? What can I learn from Dr. Darshan Shah and Andrew Huberman? And what can I learn from the latest, the most advanced researchers today? And I try and take all that information together and then create my protocols for hypothyroidism or cancer, autoimmune disease based off that information. But, I really think Chinese medicine, for example, I think if I had to pick one system to operate on to help somebody heal, it would be at the very, very top of my list.
Wow.
I think I think they are incredibly accurate at diagnosis. I do tongue diagnosis with patients, so I do blood work, but I also will have them take a picture of their tongue.
Interesting.
And I will because that really allows me to know herbal diagnosis, what herbs to recommend, even better than most standard blood tests.
Ah, so interesting. Yeah, because back then they didn't have blood tests, right?
Right.
So they only could look at the inside of the body through the orifice that you can
That's
look
right.
at, which is
There
the
you go.
mouth,
That's the
right?
tongue, yeah.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, my dad practiced Ayurveda, and what he told me, and what I believe is incredibly powerful, is in India, Ayurveda happened first, obviously. It's an ancient form of medicine, and then the Western medical system came, and it wasn't like a either or. They worked together.
Yes, right.
So when you get really sick, you go to the Western medical system, but your Ayurvedic doctor is sometimes bringing you into the hospital, there with you the whole time, and then when you get discharged from the hospital, they're there to again get you healthy and keep you healthy.
Well, you know, this is what medicine should be to me. When they say that mainstream medicine is primary care, I actually, in a way, think it should be secondary care.
Yeah.
And or emergency care.
Well said.
And so it's like, hey, if I am, you know, if I have something minor going on, is it better for me to take a vitamin or an herbal extract, or is it better for me to go and take a really strong an antibiotic?
Right.
I mean, you and I both know they're much better off taking the probiotic, taking the vitamin D, taking the zinc, building the body that way. And then if they get pneumonia, okay, we're going to get you in the hospital. We're going to get you to take a doctor. We need to take the antibiotic. But the problem is like kids are going in to their pediatricians and it's like antibiotic, ADHD medication, steroid. And the reality is 90% of the time, none of those drugs were required. Right. You could have been taking echinacea. You could have been doing things natural with zero side effects. But now, because you've taken all these antibiotics, you've destroyed your gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. You've caused this microbiome dysbiosis. And now your chance of getting a secondary infection or a chronic illness goes up, you know, dramatically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, you know, in the United States, I think this country is the most guilty of this, and we've completely separated the two systems, right? And there's some history behind that, the Flexner report, if you're familiar.
Yes.
I mean, basically, it destroyed anything that did not have like a randomized controlled trial behind it. And you talk about this a lot, is like these trials, a lot of them are flawed. They're influenced by the pharmaceutical industry, just trying to sell the pharmaceuticals. And we've completely disconnected traditional medicine from the new system, right?
You know, there's this great study. It was actually a study on studies.
Yeah.
And I'm forgetting the journal name. I typically know, but it's not coming to me right now. But people could look this up. And they basically found that when you read the headline of a study and you look into the study, 51% was their numbers, 51.2% of studies they said are flawed and they're not accurate. If you think about that, around 50% of studies, when you're reading the results, they're not accurate. That's a lot, and that's really can create a lot of deception for people and a lot of misunderstandings. And here's an example of this. People know this to be true. You know how many studies show that beef is great for you? But it's about 50-50. Or dairy.
Yeah.
There are, and they went through this study and said, well, because a lot of times they're not saying, is it grass-fed, or finished, is it organic, is it slaughtered the right way? I mean, there's a number of things there versus, so people are just saying beef. Yeah. Well, what beef do you mean? You know, and so there's a lot of these headlines saying red meat causes heart disease. Yeah. Well, we're at red meat. Yeah. Is it elk? Is it bison? Is it beef? Is it grass-fed? Like, tell me about the history of it. So that's where I think people could really see, okay, and eggs is actually one of the biggest ones. It was
all over the place.
So,
yeah, when the WHO put out that warning that red meat caused cancer, when you really look into the studies that they based that knowledge on, the red meat that they were studying was packaged and processed red meat.
Yeah.
And so that's not the kind of meat that I eat. I'm looking for grass-fed, well-raised, responsibly raised beef cattle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I eat it lean, and I eat it like it's completely different. I'm not eating hot dogs and burgers that are processed, right?
Well, and the other thing to think about, I think when I went and read some of the studies that the American Heart Association was quoting from like the 70s, they were feeding rabbits red meat. But you think about our body's physiology compared to an herbivore of a rabbit, it's not the same. So there are all of these different types of issues that you can run into.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, and I think we're given. I mean, the egg thing that you mentioned is it's so hilarious almost, right? Like you and I both grew up in a time where one day Time magazine, the cover is "Don't eat eggs, you're gonna die," and the next few years later is like, eggs are the best thing ever.
Or butter, margarine, butter.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And it just goes to show you that, there's so much ancient wisdom that we're ignoring in favor of like the studies now, but the studies are just always contradicting each other. And like you said, 50% of them are wrong. I also notice when I read the headline of a study and the conclusions, and then you look in the data, the conclusions they've made are completely opposite sometimes what the data shows.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's wild, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So how does someone like sort through all this?
Well, I think one, people need a guide. And then so maybe part of the question becomes, well, how do you pick a guide? And then how do you learn from that guide? And so I'll just share for myself. One of the things that I always tried to do, and again, this is this principle I talked about earlier, by your fruit, you'll recognize them. Who's a physician who really knows what they're talking about, who's seen great results in their own life, their family's life, their patients, and they're not seeing side effects later on. And so that's what I would do. I think a lot of times people are online on social media looking at like, hey, what's the latest influencer trend? Is it eating a whole bottle of Tylenol or just as bad, maybe not quite as bad, but pretty bad, drinking a whole bottle of apple cider vinegar? Like, that's not good either. It's going to rip your stomach apart and your whole esophagus. So all that being said, I think that you really want to, and listen, I try and do this like in my marriage. Chelsea and I look at who are some pastors we really trust, priests, rabbis, like who are people we really trust with great marriages who have sound advice. Let's learn from them. Who are some people that we have who have, again, in our faith? And again, same thing with, I mentioned great marriages, but the same thing with your health. It's you want to recognize and find, and that's why people listen to your podcast. They said, okay, Dr. Darshan Shah, he was trained at Mayo Clinic. He understands natural medicine. He is recommending these advanced therapies. We see his patients, they're reversing autoimmune disease. They're reducing inflammation. They're losing 50, 100 pounds. So I would say, and there's a psychologist I like, and he's studied a lot of this. Like, how do you discover the truth?
Yeah.
And here's what he said. Go and find the 5 people or 10 people leading their field that are getting really great results with their, and then start writing down what do they all have in common. Oh, they all recommend first and foremost to get off my butt and start moving and start walking daily. Oh, they're all recommending vitamin D. Oh, they're all recommending this. And that's so that's how he suggests you find truth and wisdom, or who are the most wise people, and what do they all recommend in common?
That's such a great kind of structure, and I love what you said about finding the fruits. Just look at their results. Like, what are they achieving for their patients? And I think once you see that, and you understand that they are actually practicing what they preach themselves to on their own bodies, that also makes a big difference. And you and I probably both know doctors that are incredibly unhealthy themselves, right? And so there's a problem there. There's a mismatch.
There is. I think most people are gonna. The doctors I respect most. Listen, anybody that has a high level of integrity, they're gonna practice what they preach.
Right. Absolutely. So I feel that you've done a lot of deep research into ancient traditions and ancient medicines, and you reference Chinese medicine a lot, and also there's a form of Japanese medicine. You mentioned Kenpo. Is that right?
That's right.
What are they doing in Kenpo?
So they are. Again, it's really just an extension of Chinese medicine. And here's how this works. They use something called the 5 elements.
Okay.
And this is like the 3 doshas.
Right.
But they have 5.
5, right.
And think about it as the first personality profile. Now, we have the big 5. It's so funny how they're like, a lot of times these numbers match up, and how people differentiate or create categories. But it was laid out, and they use things in nature again during that time that made sense. Now to us, it might sound silly today, but they would say wood element, metal element, fire, water, earth. But it was basically a way of saying, okay, we're looking at your body shape. We're looking at your constitution. We're looking at, here's another one. We're looking at the emotions you tend to experience when you come into conflict. And in Chinese medicine and in Kempo in Japan, they believe that most disease is rooted in not what you eat, not your movement level, not those things are big contributors, but primarily it's due to the emotions you experience that are negative most regularly on a regular basis.
Wow.
So they would say that the emotion of, and think about how true some of this is. If you have a lot of anxiety, or let's say a child has a nightmare, they can wet the bed. Well, okay, they wet the bed. So what does fear affect? The adrenals, the bladder, the reproductive organs.
Sure.
You know, I've had patients who've had this, and you've had the same thing. I've worked a lot of women with infertility and helping them get pregnant. And one of the things they'll say constantly is, I got pregnant when I stopped trying. Did this fear, anxiousness around, I'm trying to get pregnant. And then they're like, you know what, I'm not going to, and then they were able to.
Right.
So we know that the emotion of fear, according to Chinese medicine, according to Kempo, it affects the reproductive organs, the kidney and bladder. Anxiety, you get anxious. Your blood pressure can start to creep up. That affects the heart and cardiovascular system. Worry. We've heard people say, I feel like my stomach's tied in knots when they're just worrying, obsessing over something. That affects the upper GI. If you have had trauma in the past or grief or depression, and there's something that's happened in the past, maybe you're living with guilt and shame or hurt from the past, but you've not been able to move on, they would say that affects your immune system, primarily the colon and the lungs. And then the last area is tied to your, hold on, let me see if did I forget one? Oh, and the last one is the liver and gallbladder.
Yeah.
That's tied to anger, resentment, bitterness, and unforgiveness. Actually, unforgiveness is an interesting one.
Right.
They would say that is resentment towards somebody that they did in the past. So that affects two systems: your detoxification system, your lung, or your liver, your gallbladder, and your lymphatics, and it affects your immune system. And they believe that's a primary driver of cancer is those two systems when someone's living with unforgiveness. And so there is a deep emotional root tied into here. And most people have one chief emotion that they tend to. So you come into conflict. Do you get angry? Do you get anxious? Do you get fearful? Right? And for people to be able to determine what is that emotion that I experience that's negative on a regular basis, and now becoming aware of it, when did it start? And then being able to combat that with diet, supplementation, of course, mind shifts, changing your mindset on things, growing spiritually and in character. All of those things will help people heal and function better.
Wow. I mean, it's so, I think, intuitive for people to know that their emotions are connected with their physiology, but then we just completely separate them when you see a healthcare professional, right? We don't even talk about your emotions, right?
Yeah.
And I do a lot now because, we talked earlier about how, I believe that regulation between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is a huge part of poor health.
Huge. Well, you say that, and I think that Western medicine proves this. When I think about root causes of why people get sick, I would say hormonally, the two hormones that are the most, that are the driving factor is cortisol and insulin. And cortisol is that hormone that's being released typically when you're getting in that too sympathetic of a state, right?
Exactly.
Not that there's not some other ones popping up, like adrenaline and things, but overall it's going to be very high up there. And so I think that for most people, again, the number one reason they're sick is emotional issues. The secondary reason is poor diet and what's happening with insulin. But we also know cortisol impacts insulin. But I think those are the two driving factors. And I think that really aligns with what, Chinese medicine teaches and in Japanese medicine. And when we're looking at how do we shift and change things in the body, the biggest recommendations in Chinese medicine are first, let's focus on your lifestyle. Let's shift your lifestyle and your daily habits, the way you're living. Secondarily, let's change your diet. Let's recommend some herbs. And then let's do some holistic treatments like acupuncture. And then another big one they have for this emotional regulation is Qigong. It's really training your body on how to breathe properly while doing certain movements. That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And it incredibly puts you in a parasympathetic tone as well.
Totally.
And, it's so, I feel like people in the United States, unfortunately, don't have access to this, right? And so there are great practitioners now of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, but and you talk a lot about this on your podcast as well, but how can just the general public, how can get more access, more knowledge around some of these ancient traditions and how to use them?
Yeah, I would say, I get this question a lot. There are not a lot of books on this.
I know. There's not a lot of it.
And I wrote a book, and I don't want to say it's the best one out there because there are probably better that get more into the deepness of it. But I wrote one that I wrote for patients and for people. It's called Ancient Remedies. And that gets into some of these ideas that I wrote about years ago. There's another book I love by Paul Pitchford. It's called Healing with Whole Foods. That's a really good one. The more philosophical one, again, if you're into sort of this philosophy, it's called The Web That Has No Weaver. That's probably the most popular in that kind of...
The Web That Has No Weaver?
Yeah,
Wow.
and the TCM. So it kind of shows you the interconnections of the organ systems and that idea there. So that would be one. But really, I think it's reading articles. I think seeing an acupuncturist is greatly beneficial, has tremendous benefits for your health. And what acupuncture does, I think, it's so funny. Like I grew up in a really, I had great parents.
In Ohio, right?
In Ohio,
Yeah.
great parents, Christian household. But my mom was sort of one of these moms that was like, if it came from China, it was the devil. Like,
Oh my gosh, right,
I mean,
right.
listen, I'm over exaggerating
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it was like, the words like chi and yin and yang,
Yeah.
it was like, what is that? That's like new age or something like that. So, but it's funny when I started learning about it, I'm like, it's just a different language, and they're explaining things actually in a way that's much more understandable and even practical when you're practicing medicine to help people get well. I mean, like the idea around like Chinese medicine, this is oversimplified, but this is how most people should think about it. If you want to heal, the way you heal is you change your internal environment. You're not sick because of genetics. You're not sick because of some outside thing. You are sick because your internal environment is not well. Think about it as a garden bed, right? You need sun, you need certain types of microbes in the soil, certain nutrients, like that's what you need. And so in Chinese medicine, they would say, okay, internally, your body typically doesn't have one thing that makes you sick is it's not enough qi. Today, that's just mitochondrial ATP. It's your body doesn't have enough cellular energy. Okay, your body is too yin or yang. That's hormone balance. You have too much progesterone or estrogen. Is there an imbalance there? And then you have, is your body too cold internally or is it too hot? Is it too damp or is it too dry? Is it too much movement, called wind, or too little movement, called stagnation? And they just look at those factors and recommend herbs and lifestyle changes and other sorts of medical treatments in order to bring the body back into balance. So for instance, hypothyroidism in Chinese medicine is a qi and yang deficiency. Qi, again, mitochondria is low cellular energy. Yang is your body's not anabolic enough. It's not regenerating enough. So we'd know in Western medicine, okay, what is the number one qi and yang boosting herb in all of medicine today, or at least in Ayurveda? Ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha, right?
And then in Chinese medicine, they would recommend maybe something like a ginseng or a combination of herbs typically together. But well, okay, we know that works. And so, but my point there is that it's really simplistic, but it's really effective.
Yeah.
And it's even more effective when you combine that with Western medicine and all the things that you practice today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great point because all of this exists. This exists for millennia, right?
Yeah.
And we all have it available to us. It's, like you said, it's hard to find great books on it. I'm so glad you wrote one. But there are practitioners of Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, out there that you can find in most local communities. I think the hardest mental leap people have to make is to give it a try, right?
That's right. Agreed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, acupuncture, the way it works is they believe that, and they're right, is that different organ systems are tied to different muscles and different tendons and ligaments and areas of the body. And we know this, for instance, like if somebody has a heart attack, they get pain in their left arm.
Sure.
If somebody has a gallbladder attack, it's the right shoulder, right? So there's very specific areas of your body that are tied to organs. And those are channels that they knew thousands of years ago in Chinese and medicine and Ayurveda. And they're part of these acupuncture lines. But what they do is when they put a needle in an area for acupuncture, they're stimulating that area, which will cause more blood flow to go to that organ. And that's all they're doing. Is bringing blood, oxygen, and cellular energy to the organ to allow it to function better.
So interesting, right? So what I love about you too is that you have all this deep wisdom in the ancient modalities, but you also have incredible knowledge and all the new stuff that's coming out there, things like peptides and
Sure.
stem cells and all of this. And when you're talking to your patients, how do you kind of take them on that journey from the
Sure.
ancient wisdom to what's new?
Well, one, again, I just try and create these sort of similarities of saying, again, like I did, like, what is chi? Well,
Yeah.
it's ATP, it's cellular energy, right? So it's this thing here. And so I think just educating them on those things and showing the validity of both, because I think, listen, if you and I have patients who are sick, they're going to benefit the most when you can bring both these things in together. I think in most cases. And so, and sometimes I just decide to speak someone's language. Sometimes I'm not really getting into the ancient medicine because that's not a language they speak or even want to learn about. They just want to get well. Yeah. So I'm just, I'm recommending, but I always do try and educate people as much as possible. Like when I write out like, hey, here's the 5 supplements I want you to take. Oftentimes I'll put next to it both the Western and the Eastern idea of, hey, here's how this is working. So ashwagandha. Well, hey, we know that this is it's been shown in studies to help regulate thyroid hormones and support TSH and T4 levels, and but it's also for qi and a yang booster, So I try and do both, but again, I just try and speak people's language, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I want to talk to you about some of the new stuff, but before we do that, I really don't want to miss talking about your latest book. Which is right here, the Biblio Diet.
Yeah.
And, I went to Catholic school when I was a kid, read the Bible in Catholic school. And there's so much wisdom in there. Obviously, it's one of the most read books on the planet.
Yeah.
It has so much knowledge in there. How did you pick apart the health how did you pick apart the health advice in the Bible and put it together for people?
Well, one, I was really blessed to grow up learning about the Christian faith.
Yeah.
So one, I generally have a knowledge, and listen, of course, there's many people who have much greater knowledge theologically than I do, but I did really grow up with it. And then I did everything from, like, I was in youth group, I've taught youth group, I've led growth groups over the years, been involved with a lot of pastors and churches. I've taken theological courses myself. So I've really spent a lot of time studying the Bible, reading the Bible, understanding the theology of the Bible, but then doing it with the lens of health in mind. And so here's really what the Bible teaches. By the way, I think the Bible is the greatest health book ever written, because really it's dealing with spiritual, emotional, mental issues, but also it really dives deep into farming. And there are verses in the Bible in Leviticus that talk about, here's what to do if you have mold issues in your home. I mean, it really is getting in depth there. So when
I read that, it's, they tell you, like, clean your house, and then if your house can't get clean and you still have symptoms, you burn your house down and take it out of town, right?
That's
something
right.
like some of that
It
effect,
is.
right?
That's exactly what it is. It's like the third time, if you clean it and it comes back,
get rid of your house.
Burn it.
Yeah.
And at the time they're living in tents, right? Because it was the Israelites in the desert. But you burn it.
But it's great advice, actually. You can't live in a house that you can't get rid of the mold.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly.
They knew this for centuries. Right?
Yeah, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. So going back, here's what I think the Bible teaches dietarily. Now, here's something else amazing. Jesus, 2/3 of all of his parables he taught were about food and farming.
That's right.
So there was a lot of, obviously there's a lot of that information in the Bible. And if you would go, anybody who reads the Bible and they go through with a magnifying glass, you'll see so many health and food references in there. But the Bible starts off in the Garden of Eden. By the way, we start off in a garden in the Bible. And then it says, in eternity, heaven is here on earth. It's in a garden city. So Genesis, the first few books we read about being in a garden. Revelation 21 and 22, the last 2 books of the Bible, we read about being in a garden city. And so I think that's important to know. Now, when we're in the garden early with Adam and Eve, they're herbivores. They're eating fruits. They're only eating perennial plants. So they're eating probably fruits and nuts and certain other types of vegetation, and that's what they're eating. And then the curse happens. They're banned from the garden. And that's when we start to see modern farming practices such as growing grains and some of those sort of foods. So now we go from the perennial plants where you're just tending a garden to now we're tilling the soil and we're actually doing modern agriculture. From there, we have the flood. And then we see there, I think it's Genesis 6:3, where after God floods the planet, he tells he tells he tells Noah, he said, I will never flood the earth again. And then he also tells him this. He says, now you can eat the things that creep and crawl on the ground. You can eat animals.
Yeah.
And then from there, we see the food laws of Moses. So he's like, eat meat. And then we see in the food laws of Moses where he says, basically, eat this, not that, right?
Yeah.
Don't eat pork. Don't eat shellfish. These are bottom feeders. They store toxins. By the way, modern medicine shows this today. I mean, the number one carrier of parasites is pork.
Right.
So, and then shrimp and shellfish, again, they're called the scum of the sea. I mean, they're not great either. So we see that, and then we see them recommending certain foods. And then I would say the kind of next step beyond that is when we see Jesus and the disciples and Paul and the Bible saying, eat to glorify God. Not that wasn't talked about in the Old Testament, but there was more like eat from the heart. And he's even saying things like, listen, there are certain instances where you don't want to eat that's sacrificed or eat something that's bad for you. But if something's put in front of you that may not be the healthiest thing, there are things even more important than health. There are things even more important than your physical health. Like saving somebody's soul and loving them and helping win them to eternity, right? So that's the sort of progression that I saw in the Bible. Yeah. And then also, one of the things as I wrote this book with Jordan Rubin, The Biblio Diet, we really looked at like, what does the Bible teach about longevity and health? Because there's people quoted, of course, there's Methuselah living 900 some years, but in some of the belief there is after the flood, the environment changed because it never rained until then.
Yep.
Something changed. We know that there was likely dinosaurs, maybe even now that could be pre-humanity or during those early days. We know they're referencing though behemoth and other large animals, but something could have changed there. But my point is, it says in the Bible, man's days will be 120. That's what it says there. And so looking at, well, what are the foods they ate? What did they do on a regular basis? And we see the most referenced foods in all of the Bible. Number one is red meat. If you look at the reference of also sort of, lamb and beef and those sort of things, extra virgin olive oil, sourdough bread, raw milk, honey, and then fruits are referenced a lot. Pomegranates and figs are referenced probably the most. I think pomegranates is number one, and I mentioned olives there. And then there are herbs like saffron, a number of herbs, cumin, cinnamon, cassia, are referenced there. But when I went through and looked at, these are some of the world's greatest longevity foods. Pomegranates, for instance, ellagic acid converts to urolithin A. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's incredible how long this knowledge has been there, and it's like kind of right in front of us, but also hidden, right?
Yeah.
very, very cool. Yeah, pomegranates, urolithin A, for example. Now we know, this is now incredibly well researched to improve mitochondrial health. And they talked about in the Bible.
Yeah. Here's another cool principle that's in sort of this Asian medicine is if a food looks like an organ, it helps heal that organ.
Really?
Yeah, so they call it like supports like. This is also true with glandulars and organs. But for instance, walnuts, if you have a whole walnut, before you crack it open, it looks like a head. You crack it open, there's a left and right side. It literally looks like a brain. It's high in choline. It's high in vitamin E. It's high in omega-3 fatty acids. All of these things that are amazing for the brain. A coconut looks like a head. It's full of medium chain fatty acids that are good for the brain and head. A heart, it's red. It has 4 chambers. A heart, it's red. It has 4 chambers. Tomatoes are high in lycopene. Beets, you cut it, it looks like blood.
Yeah.
High in nitric oxide boosting compounds. Celery looks like your bones. Very alkaline, very good for bone density. There's so many. I mean, there's so many. Figs look like testes. They would say the little sperm in there.
Yep.
Or the little seeds look like sperm in Roman culture that was consumed for fertility. Olives look like ovaries. Avocado like a uterus. Onions like a cells. So that's a principle in Chinese medicine. If you want to help heal an organ or promote longevity for it, eat the food that looks like the organ. And also there's flavors that help tonify or strengthen organs, like sour and bitter, more for liver, right? Mildly sweet, like cinnamon and sweet potato, that's more for upper GI issues. And then the last thing here, I think organs and glandulars are the same. If you want to support your liver, eat liver. You want to support your heart, eat heart.
Right. Yeah. It's a really interesting way of thinking about diet, and great for people to try. And I mean, all the foods you mentioned are incredibly healthy anyway.
Oh, sure.
So why not eat that way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, they said in the Bible 120, right? Humans shall live to 120. And we know that. Like last year, I think the oldest living person had died, and they studied her, and she was 117 years
Yeah.
old.
Well,
There's some people that have lived to 120.
yep.
What do you think is happening in the future here? Do you think we'll ever break through that barrier of 120?
When the Bible gives the exact number 120, I think it's also important to understand the worldview of the people at that time. And that is to say, now, do I think it's 120? I generally think it's 120.
I agree.
But do I think that the 120 in the Bible doesn't mean somebody could live to be 121 or 122? No. I mean, there is a lot more, the meaning of their words at the time and the way there's a more richness and a flexibility in some of that. The way that I understand it. So again, I think the number's pretty much 120, but I think it could take a few days. Now, let me say this. Do I think maybe we could get to the point where somebody's kept alive? Yeah. Maybe they keep somebody's tissues and brain alive and active to 150. But the Bible, from a definition of living, probably wouldn't consider that living.
No.
So all that being said, no, I think that's accurate, and I don't think that's going to change until the end of time.
No, it's a good point. And I think, there's a lot of talk out there in the longevity spheres about living to 250.
Listen, I see these people. I mean, listen, it's what's his name? Brian Johnson and Dave Asprey and some others are like, I'm living to 180 or 200. Listen, I pray you have amazing health. I pray you guys live to be 120 and are blessed. But I'm not betting on that. I don't think that'll happen. But so maximize your days. Listen, that's part of our days are limited. Cherish every moment.
Yeah,
so,
I totally agree. And increase your health span, right?
That's right.
Why
exactly.
spend the last 20 years of your life, whether you live to 120 or 80, why spend the last 20 years being sick?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's longevity, in my opinion.
Yes.
Adding those years into your life where you can actually enjoy life, recognize your friends and family, travel, do all the things you love. That's longevity.
Yeah, I agree. And there becomes a point, and you've experienced a lot of patients like this, as have I, where obsessing about certain things is detrimental to your health.
Yeah.
Like I've seen quite a few people over the years where the reason that they don't fully heal is because they're thinking about their health every second of the day, and they're researching and they're doing things, and it's like, you know what, like, and in Chinese medicine they would believe that overactive brain that's draining your mitochondrial energy, that's draining, they would tend to say your upper GI health, primarily, like obsessing and worrying and overstudying is draining your body. So I would say there's an element too. I mean, listen, almost everyone's experienced this. They go to Europe, they go to Italy, and they're like, man, I felt the best I've ever felt. I was eating bread, I was drinking wine, I was eating dairy gelato, and it was the healthiest I've been.
Right, right.
So
it's so true. You got to let go every once in a while, right?
That's right. That's right. When we see that in the blue zones, right, we see these people that there's more of a carefreeness about them, and and the other thing is they tend to be very devoted to family and having a sense of sort of joy and peace and contentment in life. And worry and obsessiveness is the opposite of that.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
And the sense of community and just surrounding yourself with people that you want to be around.
Yeah.
It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
Let's go back to, we're talking about mold, and I want to, you're such an expert in all of the chronic indolent kind of infections. And I know a lot of people seek out your advice. I still run into practitioners, medical doctors that say mold is not a real issue. Don't worry about it. I know. I'm like, well, what are you talking about?
Wow.
Yeah. And so, for those people out there, first I would love for you to talk about, like, what do people experience when they have mold exposure just physically? What are they feeling?
Yeah. I think the single most common thing I've seen in patients is brain fog. I think secondarily fatigue. But I also think just almost a disequilibrium. You just feel very off. Inflammation. I mean, really chronic inflammation. I think those are the three. Really, really severe brain fog, fatigue, inflammation, I think, are the three biggest. Sometimes just overreaction. Sometimes there's histamine reactions as well. Again, part of that's that inflammatory response. I think that's associated with that as well.
Out of nowhere,
exactly.
Hives, kind of a thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So those are some of the biggest symptoms that I see with people. And a lot of times it's like you feel like it almost came out of nowhere for a number of people. There's 24% of the population as a percentage, according to one study, they do not detoxify mold properly. There's a genetic variant, very similar to MTHFR.
Yep.
That number can be closer to 40% if you count at least having one of those variants of MTHFR, and that's not methylating properly. Well, very similar thing, you can have a variant. So some people walk into a mold place and their body just, it is not very good at filtering it. And so that becomes a big problem for them. And so, when it comes to mold, one, I love the therapies you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, plasma exchange, I love. In certain cases, ozone. I think you need to creep into these things sometimes.
Right.
But I would say first and foremost, if you want to heal from mold, you got to get out of the moldy environment.
Exactly.
Listen, you can plasma exchange all day, but if you're walking right back into the mold exposure, you're going to be sick. And so I would say, one, get rid of the mold. The other thing, the exposure there, and then start doing some things to help eliminate mold from your body.
Yeah.
I think doing some really mild binders, more like, I would say, everything from like apple pectin to chlorella to, a lot of people jump to charcoal. Let me just give my opinion on this. I like charcoal for certain things. Let's say you're getting your amalgam fillings removed.
Yeah.
Okay. Charcoal is a little too powerful to use long term because it binds to everything and it causes constipation. Well, there's another issue where it's backing up your detoxification system.
Yeah.
So that can be okay if you're doing a more advanced, like a 2-week protocol for detoxification. But that's a little bit too strong of a binder. And then I really like super high dose probiotics. Like I'll put patient on 1 trillion daily probiotics, and I'll either have them on a higher dose of SBOs. It depends on if they're having histamine reactions. But anyways, lots of probiotics, lots of pectin, or moderate pectin, some chlorella, those sort of things I like for binding. And then just supporting the liver, dietarily, I try and do mostly meat and vegetables and like apples. I really like apples for this, but like and maybe a little bit of rice and sweet potato. But that's it. I mean, I really try and do an elimination diet where we get down to just a very few things that you tend to not have sensitivities to, and really stick to those things, I think is big. And then recommending out some of those therapies like the plasma exchange, I think is a good strategy for mold. One other thing, sometimes you have co-infections.
Yeah,
and that's the reason why mold's an issue. That's why plasma exchange is so amazing as a therapy, or maybe ozone as well, in doing those at different parts, at different parts of the treatment.
Yeah, it's so true. Going back to eliminating it from your environment, your exposure, right? I think a lot of people are confused. Like Leviticus says, burn your house down after 3. How do people like really truly understand like where are they getting exposed to mold? When you talk to people about their exposure, what's kind of the advice you're giving them to go looking for where you're getting exposed?
Well, one, there's different types of mold, but the most common place you're going to find is in your HVAC system and behind your walls. So, I mean, I've had people who, and by the way, there's always going to be a certain level of mold. Like it's a natural microbe that's in the air, but you can have somebody come and test us. And let me say, some people will come and test and they don't know how to test right. I'll tell you this. Chelsea and I, when we were moving back, we were going to live in an apartment for a short time. This was just about 3 years ago. We were living between Nashville and Puerto Rico. We're moving full time back here. And we were like, okay, we're going to live in an apartment for 6 months till we get in a house. And black mold started growing and I wasn't there. And then like
in the house or the apartment?
The apartment.
Oh, where you were living. Okay.
Yeah. And then the guys come in and they're like, oh, it's nothing. It's just only isolated this little spot. We went back to Puerto Rico, came back, mold over the entire home. Wow. I'm talking about pillows, beds, shoes, like literally black mold infested the whole place. And it's like, you just tested. And you told me it was totally fine. Okay. You just said we're good here. So overall, I would say, but yeah, I mean, it tends that HVAC system is the most common, followed by behind walls, especially if there's water damage. I remember there's a flood years ago in Nashville. And this is when I first opened my practice. I was like a couple years into practice. And the amount of patients I had for the next few years with mold issues was so high because it just, you had so much water damage there. This is why it's a bigger issue in Florida, right? Florida, there's major issues with mold. But you got to find the right, and I don't know one off the top of my head. Actually, hey, Ashley, what is that company we used to have that tested for mold? Yeah.
Well, that's their blood. That's the urine test, right, for the mold toxins. Vibrant.
So there's like Vibrant Wellness. They'll test for mold in your urine and things like that. But an actual home test, there are people that do it right. I don't have the name of the company, but there are also a lot that don't test nearly extensively enough.
Yeah, agreed. So some of the things that I do with my patients, we use
Love
a
to hear it.
vibrant mold toxin test
Yep.
that gives us some indication if there's mold exposure. And then there's actually tests that you can do at home using petri dishes, and you mail them in and they grow them, and then they see if you have mold. So, I
love
think
it.
have someone come into your house can get expensive. Like you say, they don't always test for the right
Yeah.
things. And so sometimes you just DIY it and test yourself.
Yeah. And another thing I'll say too, to get rid of the mold in your house, you want to change your environment.
Yes.
You want it as dry as possible and as much movement as possible.
Right.
So we get a lot of air filters. Like we've used Jasper and some others, but we're constantly kind of filtering the air, and also having HVAC people to come out and say, hey, we need to do things to really just get more airflow, in and out of the home.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I tell people that are listening to this podcast is, if you feel terrible, like all the things and the symptoms you're talking about, and you go to your doctor and they can't figure out what it is, like everything comes back negative or normal, one of the things most doctors don't check for at all is mold and chronic infections, right? And so this is where I've made massive differences in people's lives just by saying, okay, you feel like crap, let's figure out why. And we do the total toxin test.
Yep.
And we find toxic exposure either to mold, sometimes there's heavy metal accumulation, sometimes there's other toxins. And toxins to me is that fourth leg of the stool of health.
Yes.
Like it is really like something to focus on.
Well, and there's so many patients being gaslit, and
Right.
it's funny. Like when I first opened my clinic, like in 2007, I used to be like, people would tend to see 20 other doctors and then come see me. Yeah. Now, sometimes it's the first, people are coming in the first, and maybe it's the same the way you practice today too. But so many of them, their doctor would just say, it's all in your head, you're crazy. And they would do standard blood work and they're like, it's all normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. And then now doing some of this more advanced testing, like the toxic profiles and things like that, we can tell so much more.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is Lyme a big problem out here?
Not near. Well, it's nothing like the Northeast or Minnesota or some of those areas. Now we still see a lot of people with Lyme, though. It's actually kind of crazy how prevalent Lyme is.
It's really crazy, in my opinion, right now too.
Yeah, my Lyme philosophy is very much. It's maybe different than some others. It might be similar to what you do. I really think when people have chronic infections, the biggest focus should be on strengthening your own body, not only killing the pathogen. We do want to do that. That should be part of the protocol. But more than anything, I found that if somebody just stays weak, they'll have another infection come, or they'll never fully be able to eliminate it. So, because there are a lot of people walking around with Lyme disease that have zero symptoms. It's because their immune system's healthy enough.
Absolutely.
So in China, and this is sort of the the background that I've had as well in terms of more of that ancient medicine is, let's do a lot of herbals and things and lifestyle changes and foods that are going to really let's strengthen up your immune system. Astragalus is an herb I love that was used traditionally to really bolster the immune system, support NK cells in the body. There are other herbs like andrographis, but I would say reishi and astragalus are two of those that were probably the most prescribed for, hey, let's just strengthening the immune system over time. So I really like doing those in conjunction with, hey, let's go and kill this actual bacteria that the Lyme's producing.
Yeah. And to your point, sometimes we'll see someone with terrible mold toxicity, terrible symptoms from it, but then the person's like, well, my significant other is fine, and they live in the same house. Yeah. And it's a perfect example of how weak or strong your immune system is and how much you can handle, right?
Yeah, that's right. And you were talking about this, when you were on my podcast, is sort of like one of these chief hallmarks of aging is immunosenescence. Yeah. These things are really kind of right in that wheelhouse of contributing and causing that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we were talking about is our immune system ages, and some people's immune system ages faster than other people's. Yeah. And that's what leads to not just, increased chances of infections, but all of the chronic diseases of aging as well. So can you talk about that? So how do you strengthen your immune system? You mentioned some herbs you can take. Yeah. What other things can people do?
Yeah, I think going back to sort of Hippocrates, this all disease begins in the gut idea, I think that's primarily true. Now, now that was a bold statement. I'm curious if that was his exact statement or not. I will say this: I believe 90+% of disease begins in the gut and the brain. I think that's really where most of these issues start. And I would mean sort of like your emotions, your mental health, those are big contributors too. But I think you really got to start in the gut. And so with that, we really want to heal and seal that gut lining. We want to remove anything that's causing gut inflammation. And that's different for different people. My entire dietary philosophy really is personalized medicine. There's no one diet for everybody. What works for you might be different for me. And I learned this when I was in practice because I would have somebody come in with inflammatory bowel disease and I would put them on a diet that was primarily soup and nothing raw. But then I'd maybe have a cancer patient come in and it was like, well, I'm going to have you do Gerson therapy or types of it, and I'm going to do a good amount of raw as part of your diet. So I really think that people need a customized diet just for them. That being said, for immune health, I would say no raw foods or very few, really a lot of cooked foods. Stop the salads, stop the smoothies, go all in on soups and herbal teas. Okay? So classic chicken vegetable soup. By the way, in Asian medicine, the foods that are most immune boosting are light yellow or white, typically light yellow. Think
chicken
about
soup.
Chicken broth, garlic, ginger, miso, those sort of foods tend to be the most immune boosting in those ways. But I would have them eat a diet that's almost purely meat, broth, vegetables, maybe a small amount of fruit, but really meat, broth, and vegetables. I mean, that's sort of the most healing for the immune system. And then supplementally, from a Western standpoint, higher doses of vitamin D and zinc. Those are, I think, the two most important. Vitamin C can be important as well. I would do those. And then it just depends on the type of immune health. If it's more long-term, I mentioned some of those earlier. I would do astragalus. I would do reishi. And then I would probably do ginger herbal tea, lots of it every single day. There's an Ayurvedic tea that I really like. It's called puka tea. And it's a mixture of ginger, turmeric, and galangal.
That's right.
And that's amazing. I mean, that's a great one for people to do. I'm talking about anti-inflammatory. It's so great. But I think if people do that, infrared sauna, I love it. Amazing for people for long-term immune health, any sort of sauna work. And then I think, in Chinese medicine, the number one thing connected to the immune system emotionally is healing past trauma. You've had trauma in the past. Some sort of hurt, you might be living with shame and guilt, but something's happened and you've not fully healed from it. And so going back and saying, you know what? And one way to do this is you write it down. What are the things that you still have creep in your head that still bother you today? Write it down. Write all those things down. And then, depending on your faith, what I recommend people do and what I do with patients, especially if they have a Christian faith, is I'll have them bring it to Jesus and also forgive people. Forgive, let go, move forward. But you can do this with any faith. Like identify the emotion, identify when it started, the memory, and then recognize that doesn't define me. That's not who I am. And sort of also, I would say, I'll tell a quick story to help with this too.
Please.
So we all get to choose to accept or to deny certain things. When I was in high school, I was a terrible student. Terrible. I had really bad ADHD. I could not concentrate more than a few seconds. And I had a teacher ask me to stay after class. This was freshman English class in high school. And she said, Josh, what do you want to do when you, after high school? And I said, Miss Noble, I want to be a doctor. And the reason being, Dr. Darshan, was because the year prior, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. She went through chemotherapy, and I saw my mom lose her hair and all the trauma. And I said to myself, I never want to see anyone suffer like that again. I remember praying, I was like, God, I want to help people like my mom.
Yeah, so you had a deeply personal reason why you want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
And the crazy part? She laughed at me out loud, and she goes, Josh, listen, you'll never be a doctor right now. She said, listen, your GPA she said, you're getting a D- in my class. You failed this paper. This is why I asked you to stay after. She said, my daughter has a 3.8 GPA and she barely got into med school at Ohio State. She said, your GPA is like 1 point something. And then 2 weeks later, my mom brought me to see a doctor, who diagnosed me with ADHD and talked about me like I wasn't in the room. I remember distinctly, he said, your son has a learning disability. He has ADHD. I got prescribed Ritalin, never took it. So I barely graduated high school because, and I live with this thought that I'm not smart. And not only am I not smart, I'm medically not smart. I have a learning disability with this ADHD. Now, I ended up wanting to go to college, got denied a couple colleges I wanted to go to, but one let me in conditionally. It said this, like literally the letter from the college was something like this. You're not in, but if you come and take summer school and you average above a 3.0, we'll let you in.
Wow.
So I went and did summer school. The first class I had to take was English 101. And for the first time, I'm like, I'm really going to try because I don't want to like fail out. I don't want to be the kid that doesn't go to college. So I did that. And I really tried. First assignment was a paper. Turned it in, felt good about it. And the teacher 3 days later was like, her name was Miss Williams. She said, Josh, can you stay after class? Oh. And like my stomach sunk.
Yeah,
I was
of course.
like, oh no.
Like I heard this before.
Yeah. And she goes, what's your major? And I go, I haven't chosen one, Miss Williams, yet. And she goes, well, I think you should consider being an English major or a journalism major because you're an amazing writer. She said, there's 40 kids in the class. You literally got the highest grade. Wow. Great job. And can I tell you, it literally changed my entire life because I thought for so long, I hardly teachers hardly tell you anything typically. And the one teacher that said something that was really direct to me was very negative. Yeah. And this other teacher told me, wow, you can, hey, you're gifted, you can do something. And throughout college, I had a 3.1 GPA. I eventually turned to pre-med, right? And then went and got my degree. And it was a chiropractic degree, then got a DNM, Doctor of Natural Medicine. And then later, just actually not long or not that many years ago, I went to Johns Hopkins, averaged a 3.9 GPA. And I share this all just to say, I was a kid that barely graduated high school.
Yeah.
But I had to do, this is what I'll call it. I had to have a memory transplant.
Yeah.
I had one teacher that was like, you're not smart. You're not, you can't be a doctor. And I had another one tell me, hey, you know what, Josh, you're really gifted. And I literally chose, I said, this memory, this is a lie, this is untrue, this is true. And then I also went through this practice. There's actually a psychological practice for this. And I want to say it's called like the ABCDE method. And A is like become aware. What is this thing I'm feeling? What is this thing? B, what is the actual belief? C is, what are the consequences if I continue to believe this lie? If I continue to believe I'm not smart, I'll never be a doctor. I'll probably never amount to anything. D is dispute. What is the truth? They said this what's really true. Well, here's what I discovered. I just wasn't trying. And the other thing is when I started eating healthy, it was my freshman year of college, really healthy. That's when all of a sudden my grades got a lot better. I got off dairy. I started like getting into fitness. Yeah. And so I said, okay, we'll dispute. And then E is exchange. What's the truth about me, my future, who I am? I know this is more about health, but I think that this is so important for so many people because so many people struggle with this shame and guilt. And here's another thing. If people have studied German new medicine or Chinese medicine, they believe that you get autoimmune disease primarily because you are self-afflicting yourself.
Right.
It's negative self-talk. Oh, you're not smart. You messed up. If you're really hard on yourself and had a parent that really hard on you, think about it. Your immune system's attacking itself. Yeah. You mentally are attacking itself. So they would say that's a contributing factor to autoimmune disease. So I believe healing these mental, spiritual issues, that's why, again, I think the Bible's so powerful too. But that's critical to healing.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I talk a lot about with my patients is you look at your past traumas as actual toxins. Like, you spend so much time trying to detoxify physical toxins, but traumas are toxins as well. And they have similar health consequences in their own way as a mold toxin or,
that's right.
PFAS or whatever you're trying to detoxify, get out of your system. You got to look at traumas the same way. When you said write it down, that kind of resonated with me because Andrew Huberman did an episode about a specific trauma therapy where you write it down for a certain number of minutes and you do it again the next day, and you do it again the next day. And that's a really good way to decrease the negative emotions and negative physiological consequences from traumas as well.
That's so good.
I think the key is just getting them out, expelling them, right?
Well, I think today, part of the reason this is even worse today is I think we're living in a culture to where we're very isolated. I don't think COVID, I think that made it worse too. So we're very isolated where we should be sharing our burdens with one another. We know that we know this is important. I mean, the Bible talks about confess your sins one unto another. Be open, talk about these things. It leads to healing.
Right, right. It's so true. And you're right. I mean, I think we feel more isolated. There's a lot more shame now. Social media has made a big
Oh,
impact on this.
yes.
Everyone's supposed to live this perfect social media life.
Yeah,
And life is not perfect. Life
that's
is a
right.
mess.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
okay that life is a mess.
You know what's interesting? Just and then we can jump back into all these sort of
Yeah.
longevity medicine topics. But when you look at what the world does today, they try and find your one flaw
That's
and
true.
expose it and discredit you and cancel you. You know what's so amazing about the Bible? Moses murdered somebody.
Uh-huh.
David was an adulteress. You have these people that did, and you know what? Through God's eyes, God's saying, David's a man after my own heart. Moses is an incredible leader. He's the person I have a deep, intimate relationship with. And so the Bible is very different in this unending grace and forgiveness of, listen, I don't see you through your biggest mistakes. I see you through the lens of who Jesus was, who sacrificed you. And then in addition to that, these great things you're doing in life. And it's not to say that we don't pay for our sins and there isn't a level of justice that needs to be done. If we make mistakes, we need to pay for some of that.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I think that just the lens, like when somebody messes up, do you look at them and say, hey, I'm looking at how I can shame you and cancel you right now?
Right.
Or do you look at them and say, hey, you're forgiven. How can I support you and getting you back to your feet? But culture today is very, very, you pointed this out,
Absolutely.
into shame and guilt.
It really is. And I think, culturally, the problem that we're going in this direction culturally is actually probably contributing to all the illness and the rise in chronic disease and everything as well.
Well, think about it. It's like we can't think about someone in the past without trying to even discredit them, like George Washington or somebody. I don't know.
It's so true.
I mean, when you read the biography of George Washington, you're like, you had a man who was constantly just trying to give his life for. I mean, like jumping in front of bullets and giving his life for everybody, constantly trying to do that. And it's like, well, let's try and tear down his statue and it's like, but again, listen, here's the thing. We all sin and fall short of the glory of God. No one is perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody. So all of us should, have a level of grace, knowing we're not
towards
perfect.
each other.
So
right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
And this is such a healing mindset to walk around with grace for somebody.
Yeah, so true.
Versus if you're constantly judging, you're living in a state of sort of there's a tenseness there.
Yeah.
I love hanging around people that are very spiritually mature. I think about certain pastors, priests, rabbis, monks, that they just have this level of like this spiritual calmness to them and awareness. And there's a level of great health. There's a study on the longest lived professions. Beekeepers are number one.
Really? I did not know this.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And again, it's one study. Maybe others would show something different. They were number one. It was something like tennis players were number two. But I want to say people that were like liturgical, like clergy, right?
Yep.
Like pastors, priests, rabbis, monks. They were like the next on the list with a long lifespan.
Right. No.
Yeah.
And I can see why. They are very attuned with freeing themselves from the burdens of judgment and guilt and, past traumas. I mean, the most conversational about all of these things and just letting those out.
Yeah.
And I think we can all learn from that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Let's jump back into longevity
Let's
for
do
a few
it.
minutes too, because I want to get some great advice from you on some of the newer longevity modalities that you're using with your patients.
Yeah.
Peptides, for example. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I'm a huge fan of peptides.
Yeah?
A huge fan. You mentioned this on my podcast, and it was funny because you were saying it. I'm like, those are like verbatim what I like to say too. And it's that medications are forcing your body to do something. Peptides, along with vitamins and minerals, they are giving your body what it needs to properly communicate or to function properly. Right. And so peptides really are about, we know that there's a difference between amino acids and peptides and proteins. Proteins are more for building, they create scaffoldings. Amino acids your body is going to use for different types of cellular functions. But peptides are primarily the cellular communication within the body and signaling. And so I love peptides. Now, let me go back to why what I've used for peptides before peptides. Glandulars and organs. When you look at the human body or animals, peptides are the number one thing you're going to find in glands and organs. This is why, like you'll see bone broth, you'll see that high in peptides. But and there's a physician. His name was Vladimir. think it's Kavinson.
Kavinson,
Yeah, he's a Russian researcher, created all of these bio-regulators like 30, 40 some years ago. And he took different organ systems and created the peptides for those different organ systems. So you have like threogen, which is for thyroid, and you have livogen, which is for the liver. And so, and that's something that's actually not really been brought fully into the US yet. So if people want to know what's the future hold, bioregulators will be the next thing. Now, there's not as many clinical studies as on peptides, not even close, but we will start seeing studies on these bioregulators. And so, for instance, I'm really excited to be able to use like thyrogen for people with hypothyroidism and livogen for supporting liver detoxification. And so, I love peptides.
Are bioregulators a form of peptides?
They are. It's just it just tends to be 2 to 4 or 5 amino acid strands in length are typically what those are, and it's about the same that you're going to find in some of these.
And the bioregulators are generally taken orally. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Versus peptides, they're injected. Usually.
That's right. And it's not to say you can't inject them, because you can, but they're almost always orally there. And some peptides have a really great absorption rate. BPC 157, for instance, has a higher internal absorption rate where some of the others just don't. So I'll share this. So when I had a spinal infection that left. So 3 years ago, I didn't walk for a full year. And so I went from teaching, doing all this stuff that that we're doing now, to where I was in bed, and I got it from a stem cell injection.
So did you have surgery and then a stem cell injection?
No.
Oh, just a stem cell injection.
So here's what happened.
Wow.
I'm not built to do CrossFit. I'm more built to do endurance sports probably. And I blew a couple of my discs, herniated and bulged at my L4, L5, and L5S1 10 years ago. And I had major chronic pain for so long. And I'd done so many things.
Right.
I did physical therapy, I did chiropractic, I did perfect nutrition, and still just didn't fully heal. And then I did stem cell therapy after just 3 years of major suffering, and it was amazing. Yeah. I was like, wow, I've done every therapy you could imagine. And then I did stem cell therapy, and it was like, I got like 60, 70% better after
Did you do
one
them
treatment.
IV or inject into your spine?
Into my spine. I did facets and intradiscal.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, wow, this is amazing. Got it done one more time. I was like back to 95%. And so I had almost no symptoms. I would just get a little nagging issue in my QL from that L4, L5 disc. And then 3 years ago, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get it done one more time, just to get rid of this little nagging issue. But I was squatting, deadlifting, swimming, cycling. I'm doing everything I wanted pretty much. And I thought, I'm going to get it done one more time. Well, something happened when I went in for this treatment.
Wow.
And it just didn't feel right even afterwards. And I'm like, okay. And then I just kept getting worse and worse. And we were in Puerto Rico at the time. And then one morning I woke up and the pain was so excruciating, I couldn't get out of bed. I literally could not move. Couldn't move. And we called an ambulance, came and picked me up, brought me to get an MRI. And I got the report back myself, and it said I had a spine infection, I had osteomyelitis in my L5 vertebra. It was throughout my entire disc, and the entire entire disc was like infected. The entire bone. And then it was showing in my there was an abscess then also growing in my an abscess growing there as well. And so I had to take a medical flight from Puerto Rico to Florida. Hadn't met with an infectious disease doctor, and here's what he told me. He said, Josh, this could kill you. He said, but most likely this is going to leave you permanently disabled. He said, we're likely going to have to fuse your spine. He said, it looks like the infection's really severe. And he said, your best case scenario is you're going to have chronic pain the rest of your life. And he said, you'll be the first person to know when bad weather's passing through. Now sometimes bedside manner of some of these doctors, you're like, really, and to be honest, I had 48 hours where I actually felt like emotionally like my life was over. I thought, I just was like throwing my 2-year-old daughter 10 feet in the pool and like, feeling great. And now I have this happen. And then I went online. I thought, I'm going to make myself feel better by finding I felt worse because what I'd read about is so many people had to have rods in their spine or had fusions. Yeah. And so anyways, I thought, you know what? I just spent some time in prayer and I felt the peace of God just wash over me. And then I felt like God said, just walk with me through this. You're going to heal. And I realized worrying about it wasn't going to help me heal.
Right.
All I could do is focus on doing everything within my power and spending time in prayer.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Wow.
And so I read a study on, and so then I went to research. I said, how do you heal a spinal infection?
Sure.
And I came across some really great research on hyperbaric chambers.
Right.
So I went and got in a hyperbaric chamber every day for 30 days, and then 3 to 4 days a week for a total of 90 days. And so I was living 2 hours a day, 2.4 ATA in a hard hyperbaric chamber. I was getting IVs of methylene blue and Jensen silver and ozone, and I was taking herbals. The only thing I ate was pretty much like steamed vegetables, pomegranates, wild salmon, like
all the stuff you talked about, by the way, up to that point, you're now having to use it on yourself.
Oh, exactly.
Right,
Yes. I was
I
was the patient for the first time, really. And so I started doing all this. And then, and by the way, I literally did not walk for 10 months, and then I was a walker for 2 months.
Wow.
The only thing I could do was, and I couldn't even sit, the pain was so bad, so I would crawl and get in a pool, then I could get upright. So I'd spend about 2 to 3 hours a day at least in a pool. And I just kept doing everything I could do to heal. And then once I got on a walker, I took peptides.
Yep.
So back to this. And I took BPC 157, TB 500, GHKCU. And I was really like, wow. Like I really noticed a boost in the pain reducing and the healing.
Incredible.
I was so blown away. And then I went and I got stem cell again. Now I know most people would not get stem cell again, but I did, and I did it different this time. Before I did the bone marrow extraction. This time I did umbilical cord cultured in Mexico at a clinic called ReHealth, and saw amazing results with that. And then, and by the way, it took me a full year. Most people don't realize this. The disc has very little blood flow and oxygen.
Yeah, that's the issue, right?
So it takes so long to heal.
Yeah.
But I was just patiently in prayer, and now I'm back 100%. I played pickleball this morning before
That's
this.
incredible.
I'm squatting. I'm throwing my daughter in the pool, and I have no pain. Actually, the crazy part is that pain I had before is gone. I found a good physical therapist after going through 30 of them, and found one who kind of found the root of like the exercises I needed to do functionally. That helped tremendously. But yeah, I'm a walking testimony that stem cells and peptides and longevity medicine works. And the crazy part is they went and redid my MRI, and they're like, your disc height is like that of a 15-year-old.
That's
it's
crazy.
so high, high now.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What an incredible story. I mean, just how 180, everything just completely turned for you. And then again, 180 again, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like you use all the therapies that we talk about. The one that caused the infection, was that the bone marrow one?
It was. But the crazy thing was, this was the largest clinic in the US.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, listen, I wasn't like in the outskirts of South America in like a tin building. Like it was like the most prestigious clinic. So they said it was just one of those. I looked online. It was like a 1 in 300,000 chance of getting infection with this sort of thing, and it just happened. And listen, and I and for me, I'm like, I forgive, I move on. It's okay, And but here's the thing: God uses all things for good.
No.
I learned so much from that now I can use to help patients.
Right.
So it's and part of it really, this is why I became so passionate, studied peptides so much, because when I started using peptides, I was like, wow, because this as well as I do. It's rare for people to be as healthy as you and I are for us to notice something we take or do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because it's like I take a lot of supplements and I don't really notice the difference, but peptides, I noticed a difference. So then I started saying, okay, well, my patients have a lot of different health disorders. Like, what do I recommend for them? So like hypothyroidism, it was like, well, we got to start balancing these hormones. I really like using TB 500 and thymosin alpha.
Yep.
Now, going back, we talked about Vladimir Kevinson.
Yes.
And so in Chinese medicine and ancient medicine, they would use glandulars, which were high in peptides, and thymus gland has been used for a long time for actually a cancer therapy for supporting and building immune health over time. So sometimes I like doing the actual glandular, like thymus gland, but we do know, I know this clinically practically, that the TB 500 and the thymosin alpha 1, for instance, they're stronger. People are going to see more noticeable differences. But I started using that with a lot of people with autoimmune issues. Of course, chronic pain. We talked about those already. The BPC 157, I think, is the most noticeable for most people. I started recommending it for leaky gut.
Yeah.
So really great results with gut health with
fantastic
people.
yeah.
Great results.
Oral BPC 157 for sure.
Yeah.
I use it for anyone that has any sort of leaky gut issue. And it for me in my practice, it's cut down the time to healing from like sometimes it takes 6 months to a year. Now we can get people healed in like 2 or 3 months
That's
from
right.
a leaky gut. It's mind blowing.
It is. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think this is an amazing category of therapies that we finally have available. And to your point, these are natural biological signals, and we're not trying to force a reaction with a chemical in the typical pharma way. And so we're living in great times right now.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. Yeah. I mean, somebody was asking me this the other day. I think the thing that's going to move forward the fastest is going to be the tracking metrics.
Yes.
Like I wear an Oura ring.
Me too, yeah.
And I love being able to tell my sleep and look at my HRV. But I think eventually, and maybe they won't be able to do it with a ring. Maybe we'll have to wear like we do a GCM, like a
CGM,
continuous glucose map. But I think you're going to be able to see daily, what vitamins and minerals am I deficient in? What amino acids? Hey, here's exactly what you should eat. It's going to be delivered right to your door because something's reading your app. I mean, it's going to be, maybe we'll have, you have a stool sample every single day. You're going to get your, microbiome levels and balance right there, above the urinal.
Right.
So it's, it's going to be, and I said this on the end of my podcast when you were on, but I really think it's going to be like, I've had one surgery. I tore off my retinacula on my ankle when I was like in high school. And I didn't get surgery because I went and did a YouTube video then. They were like cutting open your leg from here to here, putting in metal rods. And then about 6 years ago, I looked at, hey, what are they doing today? It's like, we do it with a robot and we put in like a little thin suture and it's actually made of bone and it absorbs in your bone and like becomes part of your body. It was like, wow. So like that, those same sort of advances we're going to continue to see. And AI is amazing too. I mean, in terms of like what it can do. So it's the time is bright.
It is. It really is. I'm a surgeon. I did surgery for 30 years. I started, 25 years. I've been a doctor for 30 years, surgery for 25 years. Last 5 years, I haven't done any surgery. But in those 25 years, we developed cameras that you can use for surgery, and then robotics developed, and things just get smaller and smaller and smaller, and much more efficacious as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, it just keeps getting better and better. And so medicine is getting better. Alternative therapies are becoming more accepted and getting better.
Yeah.
And we live in an incredible time to be living as far as health and wellness are concerned.
Oh, yeah.
We also live in a time, though, that we are, being assaulted with toxins and being assaulted with negative thoughts, et cetera. But we just have to be aware and constantly keep mitigating the damage that does and just reducing exposure. And I think that's a magic combo.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think we're under more of an onslaught of things that are psychologically more stressful. Now, I know if somebody is in famine, obviously maybe there's a greater level of fear of like if you're in severe poverty or famine. But I do think the level of constant stress and toxins are the biggest things that people need to be aware of and start avoiding. Because it is amazing. Like you can get any superfood from around the world. Yeah. So addressing nutritional deficiencies, if you know what they are. And that's another thing I know that you and I have in common. Like I love good blood work. Yeah. Bad blood work drives me crazy. So often people, patients are going to see their doctors and they're like, we ran a CBC, everything, everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Right. And it's like, we got to go way upstream. Let's see the vitamin deficiencies, the mineral deficiencies. Let's do a GI map. Let's see what's going on in your gut microbiome. And that's where, again, why I love the way that you practice too, is it's really looking at, it's root cause medicine.
Right.
We want to find the root of your issue. And a great example of like that is like, if I have somebody with depression, why are you depressed?
Yes.
Primarily, it tends to be, maybe you don't know your identity. Maybe you don't know your purpose in life. You don't have strong community and relationships. Maybe there's a past trauma and you have a lot of negative self-worth. Let's really go and work on those issues. And in addition to that, let's do vitamin D. Let's do some red light. Let's do herbs like saffron. Let's do zinc because maybe there's a gut component. Let's do some things there. And then the last of the last resort, let's get you on an SSRI because that's not, but that's obviously not happening.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like we start with the SSRI now, and it's like all they're doing is covering up the symptom without actually addressing the cause. And to your point, I talk about this all the time. mental health disorders, almost all of them, Christopher Palmer, Dr. Palmer talks about this too.
Yeah.
And there's a major physiological component that we're always missing with mental health disorders. Vitamin deficiencies,
Yeah.
gut health, etc. Metabolic health is another big one as
yeah.
well. But you have to treat both. You have to treat the traumas. You have to treat the community aspects, etc. And I also believe that with physiological disorders, we are discounting the mental health component of that as well.
Yeah.
Our brains and our bodies are intimately connected, and you have to treat both at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say this, I think the way that you and I both look at people is like saying, hey, what's the root cause?
Yeah.
And as we talked about earlier, like I really like to combine sort of the ancient medicine and the more modern that we're looking at. And an example of this, probably the most common condition that I see is hypothyroidism in women. Mm-hmm. And, I think that the single biggest, I think there's a few big reasons they have it. Number one is they're just too busy. Every moment of the day, they're too busy. So they're living in that sympathetic state. So cortisol's high. So I think cortisol is then affecting insulin. It's affecting estrogen. Now that's affecting thyroid hormones. Mm-hmm. And we know with a lot of them, it's a T3 issue. So then there's a gut and a liver component of not converting that well. But I think knowing all that's so helpful, but then addressing it, okay, let's do everything we can to reduce the stress. Here's another big one. I read a study that said if women have taken birth control long-term, their chance of having hypothyroidism goes up 287%.
Yeah.
So, and it's like when you look at the side effects of birth control, not on the label of what is depleted in their body, good bacteria, B1, B2, B3, B9, B12, and selenium and zinc.
Right.
Well, those are all the things you need for methylation and for creating thyroid hormones.
For creating thyroid hormone, right? Exactly.
So it's absolutely crazy. So it's so curing that. It's like, okay, well, what do we do? Well, how do we? And I've seen this so often. I know you've too. It's like helping reverse hypothyroidism, getting off your medication, reversing Hashimoto's. You do it by addressing those nutritional deficiencies, working on the stress. You can do things like peptide therapy. We can do red light therapy. And we can do herbals. That's the other thing. Like we know ashwagandha has amazing research behind it. We know forskolli has amazing research behind it. Doing those herbals there. And that's how you address it. I see a lot of people thinking, well, I can just take a medication or even a supplement to help reverse this medical condition. No, most of the time it takes a lifestyle change, a dietary change, and us using more of this natural medicine in conjunction with it. Then we can reverse the medical condition.
Yeah, and if everyone did that, they would not only reverse that one medical condition, but all the other ones that are going to come after it.
That's right. That's right. Well, think about type 2 diabetes. I remember having one of my first patients come in with type 2 diabetes, and they said, my doctor said this is irreversible. Isn't that crazy? Now, again, this was 18 years ago, but there's still a lot. Think about this. There's still a lot of doctors that will tell their patients type 2 diabetes is irreversible.
Oh, I was told that.
It's crazy. And you and I have probably helped or seen thousands of people reverse type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. I remember this couple I had, they were professors at Lipscomb University. It's a college here in Nashville. And one was 80 pounds overweight, one was 50 overweight. And they were told, no, this is not possible. I'm like, well, let's just try. Let's just try. Okay. But here's the thing I told him, I'm like, you just have to do what I say and
just
actually follow the plan. Yeah. And so it was like, high protein, high fiber, cinnamon, chromium, and berberine, and let's get active. I want you to start walking. 90 days later, A1C levels, almost completely normal. Off all your metformin.
90 days.
Yeah. And they'd had it for 20 years.
Incredible.
And some people, here's the thing, if people are really adamant about following the right protocol, the body can heal really fast if they're diligent.
Yeah, so true. I think you and I have that in common, that we went through health struggles of our own. We experienced the treatments that we recommend.
Yeah.
Actually, back then when I was struggling with my health, I had to discover all of this through like your podcast, through going to the first IFM courses, functional medicine courses that existed with Dr. Hyman and Dr. Bland. And then I just used it on myself to get healthy. And I was told the same thing, that you cannot reverse your type 2 diabetes. And the way, Western medicine talks about type 2 diabetes is like, this is a disease that just people get,
That's right.
I was never told I caused this problem to happen with my diet and my inactivity and my stress levels.
Yeah.
And so if I had known that, I would have stopped doing those things.
Yeah.
And so then I had to learn that separately. And I think, I think the more people understand that chronic disease is not something that you just headed towards, it's something that's caused by your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You can reverse it, and you can reverse it quick, to your point.
Yeah.
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 I reversed I even reversed my autoimmune disease in 6 months. I got off methotrexate.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And all my diabetes medications, most of my heart medications, all of it. And so this power everyone has in their hands.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. I remember I was writing I did a podcast pretty recently on mitochondrial health, but also cellular regeneration and how fast certain organs regenerate. And there's certain areas of the body, I mean, you know this, but it's like your gut lining, of course, regenerates very quickly, your red blood cells every, 4 months and that sort of thing. But other tissues as well, many of them can regenerate. And of course, your brain is much slower than others in certain other organs, but there's a lot that regenerate really quickly. Even the beta cells of the pancreas.
Yeah.
Those regenerate fully in most cases pretty quickly, or they can.
Wow.
So
how do people, what do you think is a top 3 ways or couple ways that people can regenerate tissue?
So, well, if I'm doing where money isn't, let me do where money isn't an issue.
Yeah.
And then on a budget.
Yeah.
So where money isn't an issue, stem cell therapy is definitely number one. Yeah. Nothing's even close, but stem cell therapy is number one. Number 2 is peptides. I think it's BPC 157, TB 500. Those are the big 2. And then you can add on a third like GHKCU. But that is the second biggest needle mover. If you've got like a chronic pain or an injury or something like that, that's going to be very high up there. Number 3, follow a diet that is highly anti-inflammatory that helps balance insulin. And it really is organic pastured meat, especially salmon. That's going to be, I think, my number 1 food for this. And then after that, low glycemic fruit like pomegranates and berries and vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really focusing in there. And then maybe there's herbs too, like herbal teas. But I would say that diet with those 2 other therapies, man, somebody can get out of chronic pain and really reverse it. If you do those things, man, you're going to notice a radical difference. Now, stem cell therapy is the most expensive. I mean, peptides, it's an investment, but I do think for a lot of people, maybe it's more affordable than doing stem cells. But if it's not those things, that dietary practice I just mentioned, you can see radical improvement and healing in your body. And then the next thing there, I'll just hit on the 2, focusing on emotional healing. Really fostering, like going deep spiritually, spending time like in worship and gratitude and having a positive mindset. I think that sort of dealing with the past trauma and then becoming incredibly positive and optimistic and fostering a spirit of joy and gratitude, that really does something really special and powerful to your physiology as well. So that with the proper diet. And I guess third is you do need to move. The reality is you do need to move. You've got joint issues, get in a pool, swim,
right.
And then just walking. But I think those will go a long way.
Yeah. And move outside. Just add that last little bit. Go outside and go for walks, move around outside.
I totally agree. In Chinese medicine, one thing they would say, though, that's really big for regeneration is breathing.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, Qigong, box breathing today, those sort of things are really, they're powerful.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. That right there, what we just talked about in the last 5 minutes, that's a protocol for life.
Yes.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you eat those foods, you go outside, you breathe, you move, and that will take care of 90% of the things.
Yeah.
And then we do have these great new therapies available like stem cells and peptides if you get really in a jam like you did.
Yeah.
But those are the things. And it's really that simple.
Yeah. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Wow, Dr. Axe, this was awesome. We covered so much ground, and I really appreciate you for what you're doing now, for what you've been doing for years now. You made a difference in my life. You continue to make a difference in the lives of millions. So thank you for everything you do.
Well, it was an honor to be on. Again, I'm a big fan of yours as well. And thanks so much again. It was I love the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, you're living under a rock if you don't know where to find Dr. Josh Axe, but please tell everyone.
Oh, sure.
Where to find you.
Well, you can check out my podcast. By the way, Dr. Darshan was amazing on my podcast. So it's the Dr. Josh Axe Show. It's on YouTube. It's on Apple and Spotify. So you can find that podcast there. And just search me online. I've written or done a lot of videos on places like YouTube. So if you look up Dr. Axe hypothyroidism or Dr. Axe menopause or testosterone, you want to learn more about how to heal naturally, just do those sort of searches. And then I wrote a new book called The Biblio Diet. That's done incredibly well. People have been excited about that. It was a fun book to write, and then just social media, Dr. Josh Axe. So, but thanks again. I love your clinical work and what you're doing. It's amazing. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go to my clinic right now together. So
I can't wait. I can't wait to
visiting.
get some holistic treatment. So thanks so much.
Take care.